Hello everyone, very nice to be here. I wanted to talk a bit about how public service broadcasting has become the kind of strange beast that it has in the live sphere, focusing mostly on the musical aspect rather than focusing on the visual side, because that's not really my sphere, that belongs to somebody else, I'll mention in passing. But anyway, my first gig as public service broadcasting was in 2009, and it was at my then local pub, which was the Selkirk in Tooting, which was a fine pub. I can't really speak to it now, but it was very good. There I am, third from the top, aka at the bottom of the bill on Saturday, August 1st. I'd very foolishly asked the landlord if I could be part of the excellently named South by Southwest 17. Yeah, and he very foolishly said yes. It was especially foolish for me on a number of points, really, mostly because he gave me a half-hour slot. I think I probably had about 15 minutes worth of music, and this is a month before I was due to play it. But more importantly, I hadn't actually yet worked out how I was going to play the music that I had. And it was just me back then. It was just a kind of solo entity with solely A, no V. So it was just an A show. So I kind of wondered how I was going to approach, presenting this fundamentally electronic music to an audience and try and sort of make it musically engaging and interesting. Because I don't know about you, but up till that point, my own sort of experiences of watching fundamentally electronic music live, I can only characterise them as between sort of frustrating and angering, if that's the word. I left a gig at Brixton Academy by a sort of very celebrated performer because I was just seeing no correlation between what I could see on stage, what was happening, people putting a guitar on, playing something. What I was hearing had no relation to it. It's just this sea of muddy nonsense, and I got very angry and dragged my now wife, then girlfriend, out, and she wasn't very happy with me for a while. Anyway. And that's kind of one end of the scale. The other end of the scale is ending up on stage and just being this kind of dreaded man checking his emails on a laptop kind of thing, which is about as far away from musical performance as I think you could get. So I really wanted to avoid that anyway. And I thought quite long and hard about how I could do it with the technology available to me. And I ended up kind of thinking, well, instead of kind of chopping each song up and focusing very much on being inside the computer and kind of sequencing it all and triggering it all live, I'd much rather choose some of the key musical elements of each song and actually play them in a way that people could appreciate them being played. So if it's playing a bit on the guitar, then playing a bit of keyboard, that kind of thing. So that there's a relationship between what people are seeing on stage and the noises that they're hearing, and they can see, hopefully to some extent, that there is a degree of skill involved. I mean, that's very questionable in my case, but that was the idea anyway. And the idea was also to play the main melody always play the main melodic part. I hate it when that's kind of coming off a backing track or tape, we somewhat anachronistically call it. And try and leave as much not on backing tracks as possible. And where you are using backing tracks, try and make sure you're free to manipulate them so that you can change a performance from one performance to another, basically. So that was my kind of guiding philosophy. And the first gig went quite well, and I was lucky enough to keep getting gigs in London, and things kind of grew. Added more musical members. We're up to a 3-piece musically now, sort of playing between 12, I think over 12 instruments. I kind of got bored of counting then. Over 12 instruments between the three of us, and we've also got live visuals happening on stage. But we've stayed true to that original vision, which was keep as much of it live as you possibly can. So now, between the three of us, we're looping live guitar, live banjo gets looped, electronic drums get looped, the drummer plays some synth parts, which gets looped, the bass player plays the bass, which gets looped. He also plays percussion mic, which gets looped, which is extraordinarily hard to do and still doesn't always work. It's all kind of done using technology in certain ways that it's not really designed to do either. It's kind of buying stuff on the cheap and working out how to get something out of it that it wasn't really designed for. But rather than talk about endless anyway, I'll show you a brief clip. This is the three of us performing The Other Side, which is a song of ours, and this is in session for Last FM last year. quite a lot going on in that musically in terms of the layers. There's kind of, I think we heard 4 different synth parts with verse and chorus each. There's live guitar being played. There's electronic drums which were being played at the start, which are then looped alongside acoustic drums. Later in that song, J.F. Abraham is doing 2 keyboard parts. We'll then move on to the bass, and Wrigglesworth briefly plays something on the sort of MIDI xylophone that he's got, which again gets looped, and then he kind of goes back to the acoustic drums. And in the spirit of kind of openness that TED seems to foster or engender, I'd like to play you what's actually on the backing track at that point, so what isn't or hasn't been looped previously leading up to that point, and that is this.
Our flight control team here in Mission Control has examined the data and it looks good. So we have a combined crew ground decision. We are go, repeat, go for lunar orbit insertion 1.
So I didn't want to play the whole clip, but that's basically the kind of the texture that's behind it. And I've listened to this a few times in preparation for giving this talk, and realised you can't really hear the banjo anyway. It's quite badly played as well, as things that I do tend to be. So you could probably lose that, really. It's not really adding a great deal other than kind of slightly interplaying with the guitar a bit. And the only other sort of detail that's on backing track is the speech sample that we used, which is the sort of comms circuit for the Apollo 8. I was going to say landings, but they didn't land. They just went around the moon and came back just. That was still quite a big deal, obviously. Yeah. So, you know, I think we're kind of within our rights to use that as a sample because we can't really afford to take 10 different voiceover artists out with us on tour and recreate these things live, although that is a plan I would like to do in the future, though don't tell my managers because they're already annoyed with me enough. But in doing it this way, you're creating an awful lot of work for yourself, or I'm creating an awful lot of work for myself, and you might be tempted to ask, why bother? Because a lot of people are probably, let's be honest, not going to notice, and in addition, even the ones who do notice, they may well not care. So really, just kind of you're causing all kinds of technical headaches for yourself, and you're also introducing the potential for a great deal more error, because if all these parts are being looped and kind of played up over time, you're introducing all these layers of human error that are kind of stacking on top of each other, and we don't really have an undo button either, so if something goes wrong, it kind of goes wrong for a while. Yeah. Keep meaning to sort that out, actually, but I haven't got around to it yet. I will do eventually. But yeah, why bother? Why not just, try and create a much more polished show, really tightly rehearsed, and get out there and just play the guitar and focus on doing one thing and do it well. And I mentioned earlier about backing tracks, and I mentioned not liking them, but I'd like to say the reason I don't like them is because they're either on or they're off. They either, when you kind of press the play button, they either work or they don't work. And if they work, depending on certain local vagaries like PA quality, etc., they're the same every night. They will play the notes in the right order. They will probably, because they stem from studio recordings in the first place, they might be overly sort of timing corrected, overly quantized, as we say. Might be overly tuning corrected as well. They're going to be basically perfect. They're not going to kind of forget the next part or hit the wrong note, or they're not going to have the layer upon layer of tiny, almost imperceptible kind of human timing flaws that tell an audience via their brains, via their ears, that what's happening in front of them is actually live. And that's something I want to avoid, basically. I want it to be a live music experience. I don't want it to be something that's the same night after night after night, and I'm quite keen on keeping that potential for error in, even if it does lead to me quite often shooting myself in the foot. And if I can digress slightly at this point, reading Crime and Punishment as a 17-year-old, which was the sort of thing I did as a 17-year-old rather than talk to girls or anything interesting like that, I was really struck by its central idea, or what seemed to be its central idea to me, which initially seemed oxymoronic, but actually struck me as being very powerful, which was that crime is an actual expression of liberty, which is to say that you can't have a free society without people also being free to a certain extent to commit and perpetrate horrible crimes, as we continually see, and we've seen very recently, we'll continue to see. It's part of living in the society that we do, sadly. The only society in which there can be no crime is also one in which there can be no freedom. And that's, as I said, it struck me as oxymoronic at first, but actually it does make a great deal of sense. And it's a very powerful idea, I think, that the negative, or the potential for the negative, is actually part of what helps to define the positive. And if it's not too much of a pretentious leap, but again, this is a TED talk, so I think I'm allowed to do something like that, then I think that kind of principle can be applied to live music, in that it needs to kind of contain within it the potential for things to go wrong. Audiences need to be able to come to a show and sort of be able to say, that was a good show, or that was terrible, because they don't actually know how to play these songs. They're all terrible musicians. not just, they're kind of relying on a sea of backing tracks, which are the same every night, and going away with this kind of uniform experience. It should have that degree of variety, the potential for error, because that's what ends up helping define it as live music, I think. And I ended up having my kind of own mini epiphany over a series of live shows where, as I say, I make a lot of mistakes. I mean, if you see either of the other guys smiling on stage, it's because I've done something stupid and terrible and obvious. It happens nearly every song. And I used to get very wound up by it. I used to think, God, it's not good enough. Come on, this is terrible. You really need to buck your ideas up, practice more, come on. And I'd sort of go to the merch desk and I'd talk to people, or there might be tweets coming in, and I might sort of make mention of it. I'd say to these people, "Oh God, I'm really sorry about that. I kind of really, you hear what I did in that song was terrible. I think it was awful, diabolical. I'm so sorry, wasted yours and everybody's time. I'm really sorry." And the response that kept coming back to me, and it took me a while to hear it because you're not really listening. But the response that came back to me so often was, "It's all right. At least you know it's live." And that really tied it around to me in terms of what I was trying to set out to do when we first started and what we're still doing now. Live music has to be able to go wrong, it has to be able to go off the rails, and you have to keep in it the potential for error.